I don't believe in having a blueprint in my life. Life is full of uncertainties, and navigating those uncertainties makes you stronger, makes you more resilient, and builds up character.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ananja, and you're listening to the Oil and Gas Breaking By show. Today, I'm happy and excited because we'll be joined by Subodh Saxena, who is Senior Vice President at Nabors Industries. His career spans from leading operations in India to leading multi-scale business across US, Latin America, Middle East, and beyond. Today's conversation is about leadership, global perspective, and performance. So with that, let's deep dive into his journey and also get his views on the biases that might exist in this energy industry. Subodh, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Anand. It's a pleasure to be here. And I believe you have taken a gamble on me because we don't really know each other. And hopefully this gamble pays off for both of us and for your audience. So thank you.
And that's great. That will bring something new. That's what I'm looking for. But as I said, your experience is very diverse, like starting as a field engineer in India and now leading global business across different kind of companies and the countries you have worked with. So very diverse experience, a lot to learn from you. But let's start with your journey. How did you start your journey in energy business back in India?
So, I think it's important to kind of set the stage or the context of how my mindset works today or my operating system works today. Because I think I'm a product of the journey that I have from my childhood, right? So I think my journey, and my belief is that in the business concept or in the business world, I'm a strong believer that you need to have a vision, you need to have a strategy, you need to have tactics, goals, and measurable goals, and you support your people, give them the resources, and then you celebrate or you give them constructive feedback, and that is how I run my business, and that's how I operate. But when it comes to my personal life, I don't believe in having a blueprint in my life. And that is because I think my journey has taught me that life is full of uncertainties, and navigating those uncertainties makes you stronger, makes you more resilient, and builds up character. And I think that has really shaped the way I think and operate. In terms of to answer your question, that why did I join the oil and gas industry? So, it starts with my journey much before that. I was born to a very humble family. And this phase I call my foundational phase, by the way. There are 3 phases that I would like to speak about. So in this foundational phase, I was born in a very humble family in India. My parents, though economically very humble, they knew that if you're born in a country which is soon going to be 1 billion people, you better have some education. Now, they didn't really have too much of education. So they focused a lot on education. And, that is what my aim was, to help myself have a better life. And my grandmother, who was a widow, taught me the concept of empowerment. She was completely uneducated. She had the strong concept of why empowerment is important to be independent in life, right? So between that concepts of education and the concept of empowerment, I was able to join an engineering school because I hated biology and hated dissecting animals. That was not my thing. So I joined engineering because it was either being an engineer or a doctor.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say. If you are in India, and those are the
So
two
those are the 2
streams.
options, right? So, and then I went to university, and the only reason I joined the oil and gas industry, despite not knowing anything about it, because it was the highest paying job in the campus. So Schlumberger came, and they were paying the highest salary, and I said, look, I need to get into this, and fortunately they picked me up. So that's how my journey kind of started. So that's the genesis of how my early years were and why I joined the oil and gas industry.
Just for our listeners, Subodh is really humble. Like, he went to one of the premier technology schools in India, IIT. So,
Well, everybody, all institutes make mistakes in hiring people. So I'm glad that I've been there. So I'm happy. Yes, it's a great school, by the way. Yes.
even to get a selection in IIT is really tough, and lots of people from that Indian background will understand that. Let's moving on. Like your career is extraordinary. You started in India, then you worked in Middle East, then also Latin America, now you're in US. What changes you have seen personally and professionally during that journey?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the second phase of my life. So I spoke about my foundational phase. My second phase is what I like to call the exploration phase. So I lived for the first 21 years of my life in one city, hardly traveled much, and the next 21 years I lived and worked in 10 different countries. And I that journey was incredible. It seems like a dream to be able to live in five different continents. So were there challenges? Absolutely yes. Different cultures, different languages, different people, the challenges of living, working, especially with your family, it's not easy. And of course, a lot of kudos to my wife and to my children who were as adaptable as was required. So are there differences in these countries? Absolutely yes. But I think the way I learned from my experience was that despite the differences, every person that I met, they want to do a good job, they want to be respected, they want to be empowered, and they want to have a better life for their family. And I think if you focus on the commonalities of what exists between people, I think the life becomes so much better and it's so easier to relate to them and to communicate with them. So I think my mental growth and my ability to adapt was accelerated and compounded but through these experiences. And I met a lot of people who became very good friends. I had the support of my company and the mentorship that people provided and the opportunities they gave me. So I have a lot of gratitude to the countries who hosted us, and it's a lot of excitement that I can think about that I went through. Of course, as you can imagine, there were tears in the eyes of children whenever we had to move, but I think they celebrate that now.
That's part of the life. Actually, my father was in army, and we had to move every 3 years to new city. So
Yes,
I
yes,
could understand that. So when you moved from different countries, do you have to prove yourself, like to fit in that culture, professionally and personally?
I think professionally it was easier to fit in because, at the end of the day, work is work. You are providing service to the customer, so you have to provide that service. Personally, I think people are always welcoming if you make the effort. If you start to learn their language, you start to learn their behaviors, you explore the country so that you have commonalities to talk about with the local people. And of course, as I said, respecting them and not having those biases that people have. I think it's important to demonstrate your willingness to adapt. And I have noticed that no matter where you work, the people always welcome you. They want you to appreciate their culture, the richness that they have, and the move has to, or the initiative has to come from whoever is relocating to that country. So I have only good experiences and good memories to talk about. Yeah, I mean there were challenges, but that could have happened even anywhere that I was living. So I think it was a very rewarding experience personally. Professionally, the challenges were more, I would say, or the positives were that you get to learn the diverse aspects of how oil field operates, right? And the different reservoirs, the different challenges. So when I am faced with new challenges now, I can have that experience level to probably propose a solution to the problem in a way that combines all the learnings that I have had.
And you talk about respecting the culture and also understanding what people are expecting from you. That is very, very important. And also, I have worked in multiple countries, and what I've realized, the need of people and expectation, it doesn't change. You think you are going from India to US, US to Europe, but all the humans are same. They have a very much similar mindset, same kind of expectation. So if you're representing company, they will expect like some kind of response from you. So those fundamentals didn't change and don't change. And we talk about the foundation, like the foundation you have, the very strong foundation when you were early in your career. I think that helped a lot. But
Absolutely.
when you look back, is anything that's shifting today? Like when you look back, like multi decades ago, when you started your journey, versus how we see in this acceptance or anything that changed in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has changed in the industry and primarily for good. So, when I joined the industry, I think everything was very remote. The ability to communicate with the field was very difficult because phones lines were limited. Internet obviously didn't exist in 1992 when I joined the industry. I think the focus was in having very strong people at working in the field. When I say strong people, I mean in terms of their capabilities.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of training that was done, and you send these people to the field because if they were faced with a problem, they had to solve it themselves. So the
Yeah.
focus was a lot on people. But then over a period of time, it focused people was still important, but a lot of process came into it because people realize that you cannot replicate performance uniformly unless you have a strong process mindset and you have strong processes. So from people, it went to process. And then when you come to in the 2000s or 2010 onwards, the focus on product became significant. And because
Mm.
people realized, and, if you make a good quality product and you support it with, good
Good
people
people.
and processes, then you have a winning formula, right? And
Yes,
and that
you're right.
product mindset was very important. But I think today and going forward, I think the next P in my mind is purpose, because purpose is such an important element that connects the employees to the industry or to the organization wherever you work for. And I believe that fundamentally the oil and gas industry is critical. Oil and gas, and I would say energy industry, is critical in improving the well-being of people throughout the world and improving the economic prosperity of people and the countries. I mean, it's a known fact. Yes.
Mhm.
Does it come with trade-offs? Absolutely, yes. There are trade-offs that happen. But I think fundamentally the purpose is significant in the bigger scheme of things. And I think all employees, anybody who wants to join the oil and gas industry or anybody that is in the oil and gas industry, needs to question whether this purpose resonates with them. And if it resonates with them, they need to amplify it, because I think that is something that is very important for the industry. Because if you do that, then you build up this momentum of making sure that this industry is going to be, it's a very resilient industry, but it's going to be very successful. So I think that is one aspect. The second aspect is, in my mind, it has always been a very strong engineering expertise, or it has been a very strong engineering focused industry, which is great because it requires a lot of engineering skills to drill a well, especially deep water. But I think just like, it's not that new physics laws are being created every day. I think we need people who don't necessarily have engineering knowledge to be part of this industry, because that diversity in thought is extremely important in the industry. You get 10 engineers in a room, you cannot get a decision. It's impossible. We need people who comes from humanity backgrounds, finance,
Yes.
legal, supply chain, HR, all these people to really, but they need to have domain expertise. That is extremely important. They come, they add value, they help transform the industry. And I think that is an important element in what I think the industry will evolve. The third element in my mind is the technology enablement. The
Mhm.
industry is really focused on how they can transform itself through more automation, digitalization, and of course now AI. And I think if you have that domain expertise, you can do wonders in the industry. And then finally, from if you bring those skill sets, you will also be able to attract, retain, and develop talent. And that is the fourth, like pieces of leadership. So I think the industry is evolving, and we need people to be excited about it, about its purpose, and come with different skill sets and make this a success. So that's how I think the industry will go forward.
Makes sense, perfect sense. And you already hit lots of good points there. When you talk about amplifying the positivity about this industry, that is very important. That will bring new talent and the very diverse talent that you just mentioned about it. And also, I like when you talk about the engineers in the room. Yeah, they immediately jump into the solution and those kind of discussion, not looking to the bigger picture. But that's why we need a mix of all backgrounds It could be cultural diversity, it could be gender diversity, it could be the skill diversity that is important to make a good decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially coming to that drilling industry, like this is a very operation heavy industry.
Mhm.
How do you think sometimes when you talk about this operation heavy industry, we always focus on the results, but sometimes we forget about the efforts and that might be behind to bring those results. What's your view on that?
I think, as I said in my initial remarks, in a business, outcomes matter because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, the customer is hiring a service company for outcomes, right? The outcomes have to be there. But just like the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a boy. It is important that we understand the elements that go into to the well construction, right? It is when I joined the industry to construct a well, you needed hundreds of people, tens and tens of companies that would come to a rig, do their part, and leave. And if you look at the industry today, there is an element of integration and automation into the rig, which enables that there are lesser number of people that are required. That doesn't mean that we need less people. There's an upskilling that has happened that you need less people to work in the field, but they can do other activities, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
The 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 resource pool has transformed into people who do the core activity, but there is a lot of ancillary activities that go to make this into a success. I mean, the rig is actually a physical world. It's like a city. And people are living there, they are working there, there is catering happening, there are so many things that are happening there. So it's a self-contained ecosystem. And yes, you're right that it's not just about the outcome. Let's also understand what goes into it, and sometimes it's underappreciated. But obviously we get paid for outcomes, which is the part which we should not
I
forget
know.
as well.
And that's the ultimate business. Everybody look for the end goal, but sometimes we forget about the process itself. That also brings
Yes.
me into another question. Like, how do you see the performance of the people are evaluated across differently or same or similar across different regions and countries?
I think performance of the people is evaluated similarly. Of course, there are nuances to everything because there is always the element of the directness and how you communicate. I think the communication style varies, but the performance element is the same. As I said, everybody is trying to do their best. Nobody walks into work thinking I'm going to do a bad job today. I don't think that exists. It's the leader's job to really harness that energy in a positive way to drive the best performance, right? And so I think performance is a huge enabler for the success of the company. And that performance mindset is the job of each and every one, but especially the leaders, to create that performance mindset. Just like a winning sports team, how do you create that winning culture? And the performance
Mhm.
culture needs to be replicated in the organization. And I think one challenge that I have seen, which I think is an area of improvement, is sometimes people struggle to give feedback which helps improve
Yes.
the other employee, because nobody likes to give feedback that is, it's not an easy conversation. I
It's not
understand.
easy conversation because I have something to share, but I will let you complete first. Yes.
Yeah, I think people need to understand, you as a manager, if or as a leader, if you have people, it is your not only your job but also your moral responsibility to coach and mentor your people so that they can achieve their best potential. And if you're not doing that, then you're not really being a good leader in my mind. And I think that is something that I would say across the board, people don't want to hurt other people's feelings or whatever the case may be. And it's that they avoid having those difficult conversations.
Very, very important point. But as I said, I have seen this thing by myself in this global industry or this global business. We have seen sometimes we want to be very, very polite and we don't give the real feedback. And when some things goes wrong, then you have to lay off that individual. That is really bad. Like you had a time to give him that feedback. He could have worked on. He could have come across some challenges and improved on, but we didn't take that opportunity because we didn't want to have those tough conversation. But where is the loss? Is loss for everyone, for that individual, for that manager, for the company. Now you have to find someone else. And sometimes I understand like those feedback sessions are not that good, but you need to be open. Like I think it goes both ways. The employee should be open for that feedback, and also managers should be open to give that feedback, and then you can have something constructive out of it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, yeah,
absolutely. Now, just as you were talking, there are a couple of things that I think we should, or I would like to say. One is that I think the manager should also ask for feedback from the employee.
mhm.
I have a mentor who is, I don't know, 15 years younger than me. And because I also want to learn the perspective from a much younger person, how do they see the world, right? And I think it's important for the manager to solicit feedback. So that's one point. The second point is that our industry has, we are a cyclical industry. So there are ups and downs, and we conduct rifts. The playbook always is when things go bad, let's reduce the
Yes,
headcount because people is the biggest cost. And I think that creates a bit of what is called a contest culture, because everybody's trying to show how good they are, how intelligent they are, so that they are surviving, right? And that can be a very negative or performance deterioration culture. And I think
yes,
it's important that we address that, so that will rifts happen? Yes, they will happen, but we should not allow that people to always position themselves. And that's the job of the leaders to do that, to avoid this contest culture in their organizations.
makes sense. And during your journey, any of the bias or stereotypes that you have to unlearn about yourself?
Yes, I think, first of all, I believe, and people may disagree with this, I think human beings by definition are, they have a lot of opinions. They like to maybe judge other people. It's amazing. I mean, if you read books, somebody walks into the room, you quickly form an opinion within seconds or minutes based on their gender, their race, their appearance,
Appearance. Yeah.
and the way they speak. Their accent is, in today's world, which has become far more diverse and people travel, based on their accent, you form a certain opinion about how intelligent they are, how good they are, whatever that is, right? And those biases over a period of time become who you are, and that is the unconscious bias, right? And I think that unconscious bias is far more insidious than if somebody is explicitly racist or sexist,
Yes, you're
because
right.
then you can put the blame on that person and say, oh, this person is ABC. The problem is not me. But the unconscious bias makes the person who's being biased against really question themselves. Did I say something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? So it creates a lot of uh, tax taxes your cognitive power, and what it does is it dilutes your performance. So I think unconscious biases are the worst biases. Do I have them? Absolutely, yes. I think everybody has them, and you really have to make an effort to unlearn. I'm reading this book called Think Again from Adam Grant, and that is what you're saying. Can you unlearn some of the bad habits or your biases or your preconceived notions? And that takes a lot of effort, because we all like to have opinions. That's a problem.
It's so funny. You talked about that Think Again, that book. And yesterday only, I have seen that book. Somebody was talking about it. And I had a plan to order that book for myself.
Yeah. Well, once I read it, you can have it from me. So that's going to be my gift
Uh,
to you.
and that's amazing. Like yesterday only, I came to know about that book and somebody was talking about it. That's that's excellent. But sometimes we don't know about those biases that we have. And I think that also goes back to our discussion on feedback, because the people around us can give us that feedback if we want to take that feedback and want to make it work, and to want to look more on the constructive side instead of getting offended.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, you have to approach in a respectful way. All feedback has to be done in a way, in a circle of trust, in a way that inspires the people to believe that you are genuinely interested in their improvement. If you're going to approach it in a way that is going to be negative, you're
Yes.
going to lose the audience, right? Because by definition, I think appraisals or feedback is subjective. I This is my opinion of somebody else, right? So
Yes.
it needs to come with certain fact based, and it has to be timely. The
Yes.
problem is people also wait for 6 months, 9 months, end of the year. It's too late. You have to give feedback as and when. And feedback doesn't mean always bad. You should also celebrate successes. And I don't think we do enough of that. And I don't think I do enough of that. And I think celebrating successes and giving positive feedback, especially publicly to people, is as important as giving constructive feedback privately.
Makes sense. And now we already talked about industry in general, but what other technologies do you see is going to make big impact on this industry going forward? And also, I have a follow up question on that one. If somebody wants to make big in this industry as a career or as a business, what mindset and skills they should have?
So I think what will really change the industry, as I said, there is an element of automation, digitalization that is important. I think one technology which will really help improve this industry is what is called the recovery factor. So recovery factor, the concept is if you have 100 barrels of oil inside the ground and you drill a well, the likelihood that you will recover 100 barrels is zero. You will
Mhm,
never recover 100. So recovery factor is a percentage of how much you will recover.
mhm.
And people will be amazed to know that an unconventional reservoir, the recovery factor is 7 to 8%.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
So you are leaving the 100 barrels of oil or gas, whatever that equivalent amount is, you're only recovering 7 to 8 barrels in the lifetime of the well.
Mhm.
And if you go to a conventional reservoir, yeah, you may be 20%, 25%. But still, it's never, it's not 40%, it's not 50, it's not 70, it's not 90. So if somebody is is able to improve the recovery factor, that is, I think, a game changer in the world of oil and gas industry specifically. Because imagine if from a carbon footprint, you would need to drill lesser number of wells to
Yes.
extract the same level of oil and gas. Because we know
Yes.
hydrocarbons will be needed
Yes.
for eternity,
Yes.
but that recovery factor, so it requires, you need to have a chemistry background, you need to have hydraulics background, completions back. I don't know what all technical skill sets are required,
Yes.
but is a key, I think, for the operators. This is going to be a game changer. So I think that is one big element of driving change. Now, obviously, there is this concept of energy expansion that is going to continue to happen. And I think that skill set is equally important between geothermal, between renewable, fossil fuels, all that coming together because the energy needs will continue to increase. So I think to answer your first question, technology which helps improving recovery factor, which deploys automation, digitalization to improve efficiency is key. In terms of skill sets, I think I spoke about that. That domain expertise and that diversity in thought is so important in the industry to drive change, to embrace new ideas, because we know that our industry is kind of slow to change and we
Mhm.
need people who are change agents. So I think that element of skill set is important. I think oil industry is going to welcome, and Neighbors, my company, and we welcome people with different skill sets. And of course, irrespective of the nationality, gender, all that, but different
Yes.
skill sets is extremely important, especially non-engineering skill set, I would say.
Excellent. And that's what we want to hear because this energy industry, as you said, like they're more receptive to different perspective. And that's why we need different perspective to make something different than what we were doing before. And the other thing you have already underlined, this industry is not going anywhere. This has survived many cycles and is going to survive for much longer than you and I or many of us. So it's not going to change because we'll
Well,
still need
definitely,
hydrocarbons.
definitely me. I'm much older than you, so definitely.
Definitely me, yes, because every few years we think or we hear about this industry is going to die, we have to look for something else, but then it comes stronger. So that's going to continue for many more decades to come. But that also brings us to our rapid fire round. Subodh, are you ready?
I, let's go for it. Let's see.
Let's start. Most underrated leadership skill in oil and gas.
Most underrated leadership skill in oil and gas, being a kind leader.
How? I think sometimes we miss that part.
Yes.
Makes sense. One myth about operational excellence.
One myth about operational excellence.
Yes.
Operational excellence can reaches a ceiling. I don't think that there is any ceiling related to operational excellence. It is a journey. It is not a destination, and it has to continue nonstop every day.
So there's always an opportunity to improve.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. India versus global work culture. Biggest difference in one line.
Empowerment.
Yeah. I think India has made some progress, but it's
I
still.
haven't worked in India for nearly 30 years now or
Yes.
20 years. So
But I could say that, yeah, like the things are changing, but it's still slow. Leaders need more dash and less dash.
sorry, say that again.
Leaders need more dash and less dash. So you have to
Okay.
fill. You have to fill those blanks.
Leaders need more purpose and less leaders need less. They need less of speaking. They
More
need to
listening.
listen more. They need to listen more. They need to speak less.
Sometimes it's really hard. Toughest decision you have had to take.
Toughest decision that I have had to take. I mean, if I had to pick up one is, the number of people that I have let go due to various reasons. Because anytime I let go of a person, I think it's a reflection on the manager, which is me, because I have not been able to get them to the level that they should be. So anybody that I have let go because of poor performance, I think I take share of that blame, so to say.
It's always tough. I can understand. Habit that keeps you effective as a leader.
Habit that keeps me effective as a leader.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I would say two habits that I have, which I have been practicing, I don't know for how many decades. One is I pray every day as a sense of gratitude. I'm not a very religious person, but I pray for that grounding and for that gratitude. And I exercise pretty much every day. In fact, my calendar is blocked between 12 and 1, and I don't entertain any meetings. I don't want to. That is my time, and I don't let my boss even have meetings during that period of time. The only exception is customers and
Yes.
anything that may be an emergency. But that is my time because that helps me reset, and it just drives me to work harder, builds up my endurance, which I like.
Makes sense. Best advice you have ever received early in your career.
Yes. Actually, there were two, but I'll pick up one. The first one is policies and procedure set the floor of the culture of the organization. Leaders set the ceiling for the culture of the organization through their actions.
Yes, yes. And they prove themselves and people follow them, if they prove themselves. Makes sense. Biggest mistake young engineers make today.
I think they underestimate the importance of spending time in the field. And when I say field, I mean understanding the product, whatever product that they are, because the product knowledge, the service that you're providing to the customer is so important because if you do not have that grounding, when you become a leader, become a manager, you become, I mean, everyone becomes a generalist. You're managing people, you're managing strategy. But if you know the core of the business from a strategy perspective, you know what the customer wants, you know what your competition is, you know how the product can evolve, you know what people you need, what skill set you need. So I think understanding in any business, understanding the heart of the business, which generates revenue, I think the field engineers sometimes want to shorten that time period because working in the field is tough. And I think if you cut short that too much, never appreciate the life of the field worker, and then you are not taking decisions that are centric to the field and hence to the customer.
Makes perfect sense. One bias you would like to eliminate in this industry.
The bias against women, I would say, because the uh, the U.S. national, if you look at the employment gender based, 47% of the workforce is women.
Mhm.
In oil and gas, there is 23%. I realize some of the work in the field is difficult for the woman, but still, it's only 23%.
Mhm.
More than 50% of the bachelor's degrees are given to women, and nearly 60% of master's postgraduate degrees are given to women. But if you look at the number of women in our industry, they are very few. And I think that goes back to my unconscious bias that we want to hire people who are similar to us. And I think that unconscious bias needs to change, and we need to have more women in the industry. It changes the dynamic and completely differently, I believe.
I see that trend is changing, but it's still a long way to go. So I fully agree. Last not the least, future of energy leadership belongs to people
who are willing to take risks.
that's amazing. And that's what is needed. Sometimes we are very conservative to take risk. We have to explore something new that not has been explored yet.
Absolutely. I think, one of the most difficult things as a business leader, I think, is building a business. Because, and I did the same thing when you are trying to build a business, you really have to think through the whole ecosystem of what matters to the customer, what matters to the people. How will I position this product versus my competition? What will I do to sustain this product? A lot of the new managers, they come, they say, okay, let me do cost management, reduce the cost structure by 5%, and then the profitability improved by 5%. Yes, we need to do that. But I think building the business is the key measure of success in my mind in any industry, and especially in our business. Building a business and growing it 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x is, and doing it successfully without, safely, ethically, profitably, and of course in a way that motivates people is I think is so important. And I think that and it's very gratifying as well if you can do that.
You have done really, really good, and also we learned a lot in this short time. But we're coming to the end of our discussion. If somebody listened to this conversation after 5 years, what one key takeaway you want them to take from this conversation?
What one key takeaway? This is not a rapid fire. This is
No, no, it's not rapid fire. We are done with rapid fire. As I said, we have learned a lot in the short period. But if you have to summarize everything, if somebody listened to this conversation after 5 years, what would be one key takeaway from them?
sure. So in my mind, from if you read any leadership book, if you listen to any lifestyle coaches, they all tell you don't try and change other people, because it's very difficult to change other people. The change comes from within, right? But how do you change yourself? How do you change yourself, whether that's behavior, whether that is learning a new skill set, adapting, because this industry is going to continue to evolve. So how do you change yourself? And I will kind of give you my perspective on how I do this thing. Hopefully it resonates with the audience. I have this concept of a healthy level of split personality inside me. I have this thing. I know I'm capable. I do a good job. So I have this level of confidence inside me that I know I can do this. But at the same time, I have that counterbalance, which also tells me that when I make a mistake, that I messed up and I have to learn from it. And I have this level of reflection that why did I do what I did, what mistake I did, and how can I learn from it? So I think, and I beat myself down on that. So I think this, because if I didn't, because if I only did the first thing and I only had the ego part, then, I will not make much progress. And if I only had humility and I only had, I was depressed, I will never, move
All
ahead.
right.
I'll stay static, right? I think the way I see this for the audience is that can you have the right level of self-awareness to drive yourself forward with the right level of conviction, but at the same time, continue to learn? Because I also know in the bigger scheme of things, whether in this world or even in my organization, I'm a nobody, right? So it really drives me when I know that I can become better. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I practice this confidence that I know that I can do this, right? So I think that healthy balance, that healthy tension is my winning formula. It may be other people's winning formula. So I would like people to have that takeaway that how can they drive themselves? How can they compete with themselves, not with anybody else?
You made a really, really good point. Sometimes we can have ambition, but if we don't believe in ourselves, then those ambitions are like far fetched. If you're really serious about those ambitions, then you have to work on your confidence and to take it forward and to compete within yourself to make it big. I fully agree, Subodh. So we're also coming at the end of this conversation. Anything to add here before we sign off?
No, I enjoyed this conversation. And as I said, you took a gamble. Hopefully this gamble pays off. So let's see.
I fully believe it will pay off because I really enjoyed the conversation and our listener will enjoy the conversation as well. With that, I will sign off for today. Keep listening, Oil and Gas Breaking Bias show, and keep breaking bias with one conversation at a time. Have a great day. Thank you.